Namaskar, hello and welcome viewers. You're watching this special presentation of Sansad TV, Bills and Insight, your one-stop destination for views, news and analysis of proposed legislations of India that have far-reaching implications and impact your life. I'm your host Kriti Mishra, and today the spotlight is on the Foreign Contribution Regulation Amendment Act of 2020. It held that receiving foreign donations cannot be an absolute right and can be regulated. Before the detailed analysis, let's take a look at the highlights of the Amendment Act. The amended Act bars public servants from receiving foreign contributions. It also prohibits the transfer of foreign contribution to any other person. Aadhaar number is mandatory for all office bearers, directors or key functionaries of person receiving foreign contribution as an identification document. The foreign contribution must be received only in one account designated by the bank as FCRA account in such branches of the State Bank of India. So what is FCRA and why was this amendment required? Well, the FCRA was enacted during the emergency in 1976 amid apprehensions that foreign powers were interfering in India's affairs by pumping money into the country through independent organizations. An amended FCRA was enacted in 2010 to consolidate the law on utilization of foreign funds. Recently, several international and well-known NGOs have come under government scanner for alleged violations. Most of them have been accused of financial irregularities or political activity. There were fake invoices, impersonation, hawala bribes and nexus of officials and NGOs to run FCRA scam. The law was amended again by the current government in 2020, giving the government tighter control and scrutiny over the receipt and utilization of foreign funds by the NGOs. Recently, the Supreme Court upheld the constitutional validity of the Foreign Contribution Regulation Amendment Act of 2020. And joining us on the program for deeper insights on the Amendment Act and its impact, a very illustrious panel of guests. Joining us through virtual platform, Mr. Vikas Singh, Senior Advocate and former Additional Solicitor General of India. Preeti, she has been a senior bureaucrat. And in the studio, we have with us Poonam Muttreja, Executive Director, Population Foundation of India. And also joining us in the studio, vibrant audience. I welcome all of you on Sansad TV and thank you so much for joining us. And before we commence our discussion, let's take a look at how our parliamentarians debated this amendment.
विदेश से पैसा गरीबों को थान के लिए आ रहा है और यहाँ ऐसो आराम करने के लिए वो कुछ ऐसे एनजीओ थे वो अपने पैसे के लिए खर्च करते थे अपने फायदे के लिए। इस बिल में बहुत ही अच्छा ये बात है कि आप सीधे जिस पर्पज के लिए आप रजिस्टर्ड हो उस पर्पज के लिए पैसा लोगे।
My sincerest request will be genuine NGOs should not be harassed by officials as the country may lose funds. Thank you.
वो खर्चा ज्यादा लोग पहले जब 76 में बना था ये 100% लोग खर्च कर देते थे एडमिनिस्ट्रेटिव एक्सपेंस पर। 2010 में जब अमेंडमेंट आया तो 50 आया, ये बहुत अच्छा किया गया, इसको 20% कर दिया। तो जो भी आपको कंट्रीब्यूशन मिल रहा है, जिस चीज के लिए मिल रहा है, उसके कंटेंट पर, उसके प्रोग्राम पर, उसके स्कीम पर खर्चा करना पड़ेगा।
In future will appoint, have some sort of a white paper so that accusations throughout the world that we are hounding out NGOs that it doesn't come in.
FCRA एक राष्ट्रीय व आंतरिक सुरक्षा कानून है जिसका प्रमुख उद्देश्य यह सुनिश्चित करना है कि विदेशी धन भारत के सार्वजनिक जीवन या राजनीति तथा सामाजिक विमर्श पर हावी न हो जाए, इसके लिए यह बिल है।
And Mr. Singh, let me begin the program with you and let me borrow the quote of Supreme Court. Foreign contributions serve as a medicine, so as long it is consumed moderately and discreetly. However, free and uncontrolled flow of foreign contribution can act as an intoxicant that has the potential of impacting the sovereignty and integrity of the nation. In that context, take us to the importance of amending the FCRA Act.
So when this act was originally enacted, the idea was that it should regulate whatever foreign currency that is coming into India. And a lot of these NGOs in India were getting a lot of foreign money to do some very good work in the country. And it was really serving a huge public purpose of reaching out to places where the government with all its machinery could not reach. So even in the pandemic, the NGOs have done a fantastic job. And they were able to provide relief to these workmen who were traveling and people who were, without any. But later on, it was realized at some point of time in the late 1919s, early century of this year, that this act is also being misused. So people are getting money into their coffers on the ground as a foreign contribution for the purpose of doing charitable work. But ultimately, it was, ending up in financing terror or financing unrest or financing the anti-social elements in this country. So that was a very big concern. So there was a huge balancing act to be done. And the 2020 amendment tried to just do that. So what it did was that, firstly, the people who could, public servants were also debarred. Public servants initially were not only the judges and government servants were restrained from taking contribution. Now public servant was added. Then it was also provided that when an NGO gets money, it should only use 20%. It could use 50% of its money for the purpose of, doing administrative work. So that was brought down to 20%. Then a money which came into an NGO, it had to go again to another NGO, and that NGO also had to be registered with the FCRA. So that way it could not be, siphoned off for doing activities which were not related to the purpose for which they came initially. And also they brought in the concept of that when this money is coming in, the persons who were, running that NGO, their Aadhaar card, etc., was made mandatory. So they were supposed to declare that what is their Aadhaar card, and so that the identity of the persons who were directors of the NGO, they were also made transparent. These amendments were made in because the person may be sending the money with an oblique motive. And if it is being misused here, then that would be against the national interest. So the balancing was that while you didn't want foreign money to not come, because it was serving a very laudable purpose of funding a lot of social activities, you also wanted to ensure that it did not get into the wrong hands and be misused in this country and ultimately be not serving the purpose for which they came originally. So these were some of these amendments which were brought in.
So the motive, of course, was to prevent any kind of diversion of funds. But Preeti ji, receiving foreign donations cannot be an absolute or even a vested right. We understand that. Perhaps because of the theory of possibility of national polity being influenced by the foreign contribution, that is also globally recognized. What are the global precedents that we have in front of us?
There are 2-3 issues here. First issue is that it was discovered between 2010 to 2019. The foreign contributions doubled. And it was also found that they were not used for the purpose that they were sent for, as our legal luminary also elaborated very effectively. So therefore, you see the influx of funds, though welcome, were actually not used for what they were meant for. And I want to add another aspect to it. India was one of the first countries in 2014 to mandate legally CSR.
Yes.
So therefore, even the CSR contributions which were not thought of or available earlier are now available for good work by our civil society organizations. Sincere civil society organizations have never had any problem of FCRA. So therefore, we have to understand this amendment in the right spirit. And also, it's important for us to safeguard our country.
Absolutely. It is important to safeguard our interests. Poonam ji, I'd just like to understand. Now we've had cases of financial shenanigans. We're talking about this balancing act. Why are some NGOs opposing it? When we're talking about national interest, which is of paramount importance.
So first, I want to say there are two aspects for the NGOs that the FCRA Act, starting in 1976, I believe, during emergency, it was brought in. And it was brought in to ensure that there wasn't foreign interference in the country. But actually, it was brought in because NGOs are the ones, along with the others, who oppose the lack of freedom and the unfair practice of putting people in jail without any allegations often. So it was NGOs who opposed it, and the government brought it, the then government brought FCRA Act. I agree totally with both what Preeti ji have said and Mr. Singh have said, that we must have regulation in place to protect the country's national interest and to protect any corruption or bad governance from happening. Now, the only people we have chosen to over-regulate and almost see, that was not the intention, as Preeti ji and Mr. Singh have said, and I don't believe it was government's intention originally to demonize NGOs. But look at the messaging in public, in the media, that comes out is that NGOs are corrupt, we have to rein them in. Now, I am sure there are NGOs that mismanage or corrupt, or I believe our government, when our intelligence says some money has been used for terrorism and such activities, which NGOs, we are the worst affected because our reputation is at stake. We are not against the act, but the way it is being implemented, one, it demonizes NGOs. Two, you're guilty till proven not. Three, arbitrary regulations were put in place, like 20, whether you're spending 20% or 50%, how will, if you're doing terrorist activity, why should we be allowed to spend even 20% on our administration, right? 20% for research, for coalition building, for supporting small NGOs. You know, the small NGOs at the grassroots level are the ones who are doing the real work, not people like us. We help support them with small grants, which we give to them. We strengthen their capability, capacity. Small NGOs don't have the ability to, deal with either CSR or international donors, whoever the donor. So it's normally intermediary or large NGOs that take the money and distribute the programs. So if somebody's strength is to distribute rations, then we will go to them for distributing rations. Right. Now, all that has stopped, and the small NGOs are not getting money from CSR either, and they are closing down. And these are people, I must say, who earn 15,000 rupees, is the average salary of the grassroots worker. They will never have any health insurance, no insurance when they retire. And these kind of people are doing exactly what this government wants, good governance. Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas. This is, reaching the most remote areas, as Mr. Singh rightly said. So there are many things that have come into this 2020 amendment where it is hampering the work of the NGOs, not only demonizing. In fact, CSR in India is nervous today to give money to NGOs, given the image that is being put out.
All right, Saj is that it is tarnishing the image and there's over-regulation. Let me take that to Mr. Singh. Mr. Singh, until 2011, there were more than 40,000 NGOs registered under FCRA in India. That number now stands at 16,000. So has the FCRA amendment been used to target certain NGOs? How do you dispel that charge? Something that Poonam ji is also saying.
Firstly, when you say the amendment demonizes the NGOs, I don't agree with that, because it's only, imposes some more regulatory measures in the receipt of money. So I don't see why it should be said that the NGOs are being demonized, number one. Number two, as far as CSR is concerned, CSR is not something which is in any way concerned with the FCRA, because CSR is Indian money. And if an NGO is getting Indian money, it doesn't have to go to the FCRA at all. So the FCRA does not apply if money from CSR is to be given to an NGO. And thirdly, as far as the 20% cap that has been put, that cap is on administrative with money which is meant for destabilizing the country, or which is going to affect the integrity and sovereignty of this country. Then you have to ensure that this money which is coming in through an NGO is not going for doing something like that. So it will actually be doing just the opposite of what it is meant to be doing, and which is something which needs to be controlled. Because when the government of India decides to spend money, or a company decides to spend money, these are all entities which are regulated by the government in so many forms and so many ways They can CSR activity also, as you know, is completely a regulated activity. So you can't use CSR for the purpose of funding some personal trips of the managing directors, etc. So
Yeah, that's a
these
very
are all
valid charge.
regulated
Yes.
money which comes in. But if the
Yes.
NGO
Yes,
is
sir.
getting money from some source whose intention of sending the money is suspect, then that is something which is we have to be very, very careful about. So I
Poonam ji,
don't
you
see
wanted to
these,
counter that?
Yes, absolutely.
I'll go back to Preeti ji after that.
Yeah, Mr. Singh, I want to first say that Indian NGOs are more regulated than any other sector, including the private sector, whether it's foreign funding or whatever funding. We had to submit, it's not as though this is FCRA 2020 is a new regulation. There have been enough regulation in place to catch the NGOs. We were already over-regulated. In the name of, the government has said, because of terrorist activity, corruption, all this, we need to over-regulate. They haven't used that word, but that's what's happening. If I were to give you details of what, as an NGO, over the last 50 years, we've been going through, and after FCRA has come into 1976, every year we have to submit FC3 form in all the details we are doing now, we had to do then also. It's number two. We have income tax returns. We have, in the last 10 years, there have been so many regulations which actually we have been rightly, some people have been rightly opposing. And I want to say that I was supporting the regulation because I am very clear that NGOs, because they get public money and they're supposed to be working for the public, they should be regulated as much as possible. Number two, look at the demonization, sir. You see any newspaper, you see the objective that is said for this new regulation is because these NGOs were corrupt or they were indulging in terrorist activity. The name of the NGOs, I can send you any number of debates on television, not you, sir, but the others are doing it. And also, when we deal with government officials today, we are dealing with IB. NGOs are dealing with IB today, many of us on a very consistent basis,
so the concern,
and raw.
yes.
And the kind of questions they ask us, you'll really be surprised. And the amount of information we give, and now we are being regulated more. Are we? I would say, sir, identify the corrupt NGOs, identify there is enough regulation in place even before this, and penalize them, punish them, wipe them out.
All right, that's a point that you're making very vociferously. I would just like to take that to Preeti ji. Preeti ji, as Poonam ji is saying that adequate controls were existing, and you must identify the culprit, punish, and not really taint everyone. What is your take on that?
I think we are we need to see the big picture. Today, if you see the Niti Aayog Darpan portal, you see every NGO that's working with government or which is, say, doing social work, they have to be registered with Niti Aayog, and that is since, I think, 2015, if I'm not mistaken. Now, there are 142,090 NGOs that are registered, and they are working with some 53 departments. So you see, it's not as if our civil society organizations are not contributing to social causes. As you said, 16,000 out of total 142,090 NGOs, and there may be more also, are actually doing commendable work in social sector sphere. And again, I was saying that funding is now internally available also. Dr. Poonam Muttreja is actually, she is expressing her anguish on the media reporting of the FCRA, and generally, see what happens, unfortunately, that if you sensationalize news, then the TRPs increase.
True.
So therefore, I think there should be a concerted effort, and I must say that even our Honorable Prime Minister has been praising the excellent work that civil society organizations have done in COVID. I mean, at the official level, we all have said that one is so grateful. Similarly, the health minister also. So that kind of acknowledgement actually needs to be maybe reinforced.
True.
And also reported. And it should be reported so that, the general feeling of insecurity is actually removed. That's what I'd like to say.
So your anguish is against my fraternity and not actually against the amendment. But time to take some questions from our audience here. Please go ahead, introduce yourself and speak your mind.
Stopping the sub-granting small NGO, which depends upon the NGO, big NGO. Is this effect from their work?
Foreign funding you cannot give to an NGO anymore. All right? You can't transfer any money to another NGO. You have to do the work yourself. So the small NGOs used to collaborate with large NGOs, and NGOs don't have the capacity to do all the, whether it's foreign funding or Indian funding, writing of proposals, writing of reports, उनको आता है community के साथ कैसे काम करना है, कुआं कैसे बांधना है, स्कूल कैसे अच्छा चलाना है, या सरकार की जो schemes हैं, उसको कैसे अच्छी तरह चलानी है. They don't know this proposal writing, report writing, even all of them will be under trouble if their finances we didn't help and manage. Sure. Because they don't have chartered accountants there, GST ke saath kya karna and so on. So it will affect them, and as far as Indian funding goes, there is no restriction. CSR funding, there is no restriction. But what has happened is because the CSR is also worried about NGOs, because government, that it has come out without meaning to that NGOs are corrupt, NGOs are maybe working in with transferring terrorist activity money. So they are scared. Corporate sector is more scared than the international funding agencies.
How are they claiming that these are basically through the governments, the NGOs, and what is the basis of involving the FCR, the NGOs in the FCRA, and how do they compensate these NGOs if they are like controlling them through this Act of 2020?
I want to say that point I was making was that there's enough regulation through FC3 form, FCRA registration we already had, and we had to report every year. What reporting we did before, we are continuing to do, and to the income tax and to the Societies Registration Act and so on. I'm saying from that you can make out any NGO that is mismanaging money, misappropriating money. This additional act that has come, I do not see how, other than giving the power to government to hold us guilty. So today under FCRA, they're saying you're not managing your funds. 160 days, they can cancel your license and add another 160 days. And if in their judgment, you're guilty till you're proven not. And all the NGOs, by the way, in the last 20 years that the government has said are corrupt or have mismanaged money, except one NGO, all the NGOs that went to court won the cases.
The new amendment designated a particular branch of SBI for receiving foreign funds. What about those NGOs who are working outside of Delhi in remote areas of the country?
All right, Mr. Singh, that's a very valid question.
This hurdle?
What about NGOs working outside Delhi? Why this SBI condition?
Now the banking sector has opened up so much that you can access a Delhi account or foreign exchange account in Delhi from anywhere in the country. And SBI has branches all over the country. So if you have an account in the particular SBI branch, you can deposit and withdraw money from anywhere. So that's really not a issue in that sense, and that's not a grievance so far also which has troubled the idea of nominating one branch was to ensure that all the money which comes in is at one central place, and the government is aware how much money has come in and how much is utilized and which sector is it going to. And the other points, I just want to make two quick points on the other points that have been raised. Now, when we talk of over-regulation, what probably Poonamji means is that the more the regulation, the more the likelihood of harassment by the bureaucrats. And that, to that extent, I'll agree with her that there is always a possibility that the more the regulation, the more the questioning and the more the likelihood of, and that is one area where the government must look into and ensure that it does not happen, and things are smoothened out for these NGOs, and they don't have to face unnecessary questioning. And as far as the media is concerned, of course, that is for people, responsible journalists like you, to do some introspection, because there are black sheep everywhere.
Right, sir.
Some medias, do this as a part of their, because it's only the bad news which sells, unfortunately. That's something which is a hard
Very
reality.
unfortunate.
It's
Yes,
only
sir.
the bad news. So the more you demonize the NGO, the more likelihood of your getting the eyeballs on TV or in the print media. So there are sufficient safeguards in the Act, which of course the central government will have to be alive to that and use it more frequently whenever the need so arises. And if the whole Act is seen in the right perspective, I don't see any reason why there should be any harassment for anybody in the under the amended Act.
So Preeti ji, a quick closing comment from you and then we wrap up the show.
So I would say to wrap up, it's very evident that this act was needed to ensure national security, number one. Number two, that it is acknowledged that civil society organizations are doing the work which no government can do. Number three, that the narrative should change.
Yes.
This bad news is actually the hot news, as they say. That narrative has to change. Lastly, and most importantly, if there are implementation challenges, as Poonam ji is saying, we must address them.
Absolutely.
And I think if specific cases are brought to the notice of the government, certainly it will have a salutary effect on whoever is misusing authority. Because there is sometimes a tendency to actually harass on the basis of legal provisions, when the intention of the legal provision is to facilitate and not harass.
Right.
So having said that, I think we should have a balanced view. That's what I'd like to conclude with.
Right, ma'am. So the Amendment Act aims to enhance transparency and accountability in the receipt and utilization of foreign contributions and facilitate the genuine NGOs who are working for the welfare of society. On that note, thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Singh, Preeti ji and Poonam ji. Next week, we'll return with incisive analysis of another important bill. Till then, take care and stay tuned to Sansad TV. Namaskar.